Sick, evil, or both. That is how he chose to describe himself. Drugs, murder, and sex are how he chose to sequence his crimes. This is the story of the Milwaukee Monster, a violent alcoholic, serial killer, and sex offender. Our narrative will summarize this man's history and heinous crimes, starting from his troubled early life to the remainder of his life after his arrest. From 1978 to 1991, 17 men, mostly homosexual and African American, fell victim to his brutality and sadism. As he puts it, he created a Holocaust.
Born on May 21st, 1960, the sick, evil man had been preparing for a life as a murderer. People in his life described him as an energetic and happy child until the age of 4, after he got surgery to correct a double hernia that seemed to have an effect in him. At the early stages of his life, his first grade teachers wondered if his parents neglected him, as he was different compared to the rest of the class. His mother was bedridden due to an illness, and his father was in school earning a degree in chemistry. By the early teens, he became discouraged, tense, and largely friendless, and he also stated that his compulsions towards narcophilia and murder had started at the age of 14, but it appears the breakdown of his parents' divorce and breakdown of their marriage have been the catalyst for these turning points to turn into actions. If there were any red flags that indicated future violence in himself, it was his fascination towards dead animal bones and how they all fit together. By his first killing that occurred in June of 1978, his alcohol addiction spiraled. He attended Ohio State University and then later dropped out to enlist in the Army. Because of his alcohol addiction, the Army later then discharged him due to him not controlling all the alcohol that he consumed, which made him move out and move back home. He lured his victims into his home with the promises of money and sex, but later then strangled them to death. He engaged in sex acts and kept their body parts and photos of them as souvenirs. His sick and twisted mind had later caused 17 deaths on his name.
The man was not your average serial killer. Inside the comfort of his own home, as well as his grandmother's basement, he had performed brutal, unethical experiments on 17 men during the years of 1978 to 1991, 2 of which had escaped from the clutches of the beholder. Having a borderline personality disorder caused him to have a lack of remorse for all 17 of his victims. Known locally as the Milwaukee Monster, his first killing occurred right after he graduated high school, and it was a 19-year-old man named Steve Hicks. This killer had invited Hicks into his home and gotten him drunk, where he then brutally hit him over the head with a 25-pound dumbbell. He was known to perform extreme experiments on all his victims, which ultimately ended with him consuming parts of his victim. He would also put them into zombie-like states, and he would continue to rape or experiment on them. His MO consisted of luring his victim into apartments, promising either money or sex, and giving them drinks laced with sleeping pills, where he would strangle or stab his victim. Once he was finished with them, he would also rape, dismember, and eat them. Although he lacked remorse, he stated that he felt personal connections when he consumed them.
As this individual continued to commit such heinous crimes, it finally halted on July 22, 1991. One of the to-be victims, Tracy Edwards, escaped from this person's home in handcuffs and chased down a police car. He led the officers to the murderer's home, and after a quick investigation, the individual was calmly arrested later that night due to the horrid scenes found inside. In court, this person pleaded guilty but insane to 15 of the 17 murders he committed. Instead, he was found guilty and sane for all 17 of them. He received 15 consecutive life sentences, and in addition to that, received a life sentence without parole for his first ever victim in Ohio. He was put in the Columbia Correctional Institute Gymnasium in Portage, Wisconsin. On November 28, 1994, this person was beaten during a prison work shift by a fellow inmate who learned of his crimes. The inmate who did it claimed it was because of his morbid sense of humor, which often involved joking about his cannibalism and his multiple crimes, which the inmate claimed fiercely disgusted him. The individual was found bloody and unconscious and later died on the way to the hospital, only 3 years after his arrest.
In his will, he requested there to be no funeral service held for him and to be cremated. He also requested for his ashes to be divided between his mother and his father. He had an IQ of around 145, putting him close to genius level. This is Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster. He's a famous serial killer who killed and dismantled 17 men and boys. His killings shocked many of how it was capable for a person to do everything he did. This caused a lot of books, one being the one his father wrote, explaining how it was raising and living Jeffrey. It also inspired movies, many being The Secret Life, Jeffrey Dahmer, Raising Jeffrey Dahmer, The Jeffrey Dahmer Files, and the recent 2017 movie My Friend Dahmer, which Ross Lynch plays as Jeffrey. I'm going to leave you off with two things. One being a quote by Dahmer which states, "My consuming lust was to experience with the bodies. I saw them as objects, as strangers. It was hard for me to believe that a human being could have done what I've done." And my question is that, do you believe Jeffrey really understands the pain that he caused the victims?